Hi everyone, it's Sarah, Painted Creator. So I'm back with you, and I'm planning on doing a little bit of a sort of a more moody seascape sort of beach scene. So as usual, I don't really draw very much, so I've got these boats in the foreground that are tethered to a buoy of some description, and we might have some rocks there and maybe a person and a little bit of a distant hillside. This horizon line is quite important, so it's under a third, or it's about a third of the way down the paper, and that's going to be the horizon line of the sea, and then this line that I've just sketched in is around about the foreshore line of the picture. If you don't want the person, don't draw it in. If you don't want the boats, don't draw them in. It's fine, it's your painting. And as always, the idea is to just have a little bit of fun. So for a lot of my paintings I use these brushes. These are Meaden squirrel mop brushes. You can buy all sorts of brushes, but they are really useful because they go to a point, and I've got a large, a medium and a small, and I use those an awful lot in what I do. The other brushes that I use a bit are my little flat brushes. So this is a 3/8 of an inch flat brush. I'm painting on A4 today. I also use my little number 4 synthetic sable round brush from Winsor & Newton, a lovely little brush for touching up. Quite often use my little Zero Rigger brush, and ever so often I use this really tiny 0.3 brush, which is really helpful for those little tiny details, but I don't think I'll be using that today. Obviously lots and lots of water, paper towel, and then I'm using my Cotman watercolour set. I do have a few additions in there that I use sometimes, but I don't think I'll be using much today. I use my little spritzer bottle quite a bit, and a little piece today of candle wax. So in the sea, I'm just going to put in a little bit of wax, pressing a bit harder on this foreshore edge, just to protect some and get some nice broken little lines there. We'll see that later. So time to get painting really, and having a little bit of fun, and just lean into the process. Don't compare yourself to anybody else other than yourself, and if you're having a bit of fun, then that's all well and good. I'm just going to take some of this graphite away, just leaving an outline that I can just see. I'm just going to spritz my paper. So I'm going to start off with my big mop brush and some yellow ochre. So yellow ochre, quite a bit of water, and just straight in there. Across that hill, up to the top of that. So I'm working today on roughly a sort of 15-20 degree angle. I remember when you're working like this paint will dry will dry lighter. So if you think, oh, that looks perfect, it's probably a little bit too light. So I'm going to go in now with some Cerulean Blue. I'm just going to add a little touch of light red light to it, just to knock that colour back a little bit. And I'm just going to, needs a bit more water. Scrape that water, and I'm just laying in the sky, laying that yellow blend into the Cerulean Blue. So I'm going to have some darker clouds on the left hand side, so more blue there. And I'm now going to add a little bit of Paynes Grey into that mix, because I want to start that idea of some rain clouds coming and building. A little bit thicker, so Cerulean Blue and Paynes Grey. Touch of red light in there, just keep it warm. I'm just building up that tonal value in some of the clouds, working wet in wet. And if you think it's drying out a little bit of a spritz to keep the wetness going works. I'm just going to add a little bit more Cerulean Blue and light red. Quite a bit of a thicker mixture now. Just for some of those base clouds. That's not damp enough. I don't want to overwork it, but I do want that depth of colour in there. It's got a little bit of that feel. So I've washed my brush, I'm taking most of the water out of my brush. I'm just going to soften back some of these lighter clouds at the bottom. And lift out some highlights in the cloud just to add a little bit of depth. Layering. And just layer that one out a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to leave it dry as naturally as I can. I'm not very patient today, but I do want that sort of softer edge feel. Just pick up a bit with a paper towel, just keep that lightness and a mist, I think. So Mr. Bottle's your friend for this one. So I'm going to let that dry and see how we go when we come back. Okay, so here we are. We're nearly dry, not bad. getting there, but dry enough for me to work into the sea. So with the sea, I'm going to still be using a Cerulean Blue base with a little bit of Paynes Grey, and I also want to reflect some of this yellow ochre. So I'm going to just get some yellow ochre and plenty of water on my brush. So the paper's dry, and I'm just going to drop in round about where the main yellow parts are in the water's edge, a very light underwash. And I'm going to also do a light underwash of yellow ochre on the beach. So I'm just going to add onto some raw umber into this yellow ochre colour for the beach. And a little touch of Paynes Grey into there for a little bit of a darker brown. Just to accentuate some of those darker foreground beachy bits. A bit more water in the mix. I'm just going to go up to here because there we go. Nice. So nice and fluid. I could add a little bit of burnt sienna into there, just for the warmth of the foreground. A bit of texture, a bit of detail. I've realised I've not got anything in between those boats, so I'm just going to have to drop a little bit of burnt sienna and yellow ochre into that space because that's a bit daft. Blend it in. Okay, so I'm going to let that just dry off a little bit. I've got quite a nice beach there. Quite liking this sort of warmth of the burnt sienna in the foreground as well. And that little bit of Paynes Grey in the mix just adds some darks, which are really helpful when you wanted to just build up a little bit of a gentle foreground. Just add a little bit of a shadow under this boat while we're there as well. There we go. And as I said before, that will all dry. It will all soften because it's damp into damp, wet into wet. Highlight under there. So I'm just controlling the water so that there isn't a puddle. If you see a blob or a puddle, you need to pick it up because otherwise you're going to end up with quite a lot of a run back within that. But I'm going to allow this now to dry. I'm going to put the kettle up and have a cup of coffee. So we're back, we're near enough dry again. So I'm going to paint on some of these distant hills, I'm going to stick with my Cerulean Blue as the base. And blue always pushes the hill back into the background, and I'm just going to add a little touch of yellow ochre into there to make like a bluey greeny colour, mainly blue. And I'm just going to put the base wash of these distant hills in. Oops, got some kitty glitter there. I'm afraid my cat gets everywhere. Add a little bit more yellow. Let it mix on the page. And then using a damp brush, so I've washed it, I've taken most of the water out. I'm just going to lift out some little bits. Keep it light. So I'm just going to drop in a little bit more Cerulean Blue with a touch of red light in there to just dull it down a little bit, and a tiny touch of yellow ochre, a little bit more concentrated, just for maybe some rocky spaces. So my brush is really dry. You can see it's just sort of hitting and missing. I don't like that bit, so I'm just going to damp it down a little bit. And these are all out of my imagination, so they're not of a space, which makes it a little bit easier, because if you think, oh, that's too dark or that's too light, you can just change it up. Lift up from the side, because you want the side to not have as much information on as the midground. There we go, not too much information, but it looks like distant hills. So I'm just going to let that dry, have a slurp of my coffee, and then I'll be back. So that's dry to the touch now. It's probably still wet inside, but it's fine, we're not going to use an awful lot. So because I used Cerulean Blue in the sky, that's going to be the main blue that I use in the sea, and I've picked up my little 3/8 of an inch flat brush. I'm going to just do some red light into there. As I've said before, it's a nice way of just dulling down a colour a little bit, but still maintaining it. So just going to add a little touch more water. There we go, so it's just moving. And I'm going to take the excess off on my paper towel, because it just controls it. So for the sea, I need it to lie flat, so my brush strokes have to be horizontal, but I want to leave some gaps, particularly nearer the front, and I want to just build up. So just holding my brush flat. And keeping those marks as horizontal as I can. So when you look out at the sea itself is often slightly darker at the horizon line. So I'm just going to add a tiny touch of Paynes Grey into there. If you haven't got Paynes Grey, add some indigo. So I'm just adding some darker strokes into the sea. Oops. It needs to be horizontal. So I went too high up on this side, so I'm just having to lift that sea line a little bit more. So I'm letting that white show, but I'm also letting that yellow stay. So I've run out. I need to mix a little bit more. Still with my Cerulean Blue, and I'm just going to add some red light in there and then some Paynes Grey. Some darker tones. So it's still quite bluey, but it's got some darker tones coming through now. I want to lighten this. I'm just going to add some more water, take some excess off of my paper towel, and I get a lighter tone of the same colour. Just bringing that forward, so letting wet softer lines. So I'm alternating between the lighter colour and the darker colour. Just bringing that wash forward onto the beach, in between the boats as well. Okay, so we could go back in with some Dr. Martens White Blue Proof if you felt that you wanted a bit more white, just so straight from the palette and just straight in. Nice way of putting some waves on the foreground. Remember, your waves as they go back will be less defined. So it's just literally touch it in. Here's what's on the brush. Little dabs just to create a little bit of a sense of some waves. It's an impression of waves. You're not drawing or painting waves. There we go. I'll call it a day. Don't want it over fussy. So we're getting there. I need to let the sea dry. before I can paint the person, but I can go in and paint the boats. So I'm going to be using my smaller brushes, so my smaller mop brush, my little number 4 and my little rigger brush for this one. And I'm just going to take some raw umber on my palette, a little bit of water and a touch of yellow ochre in there, and that's going to be my sort of inside colour for the boats, because that'll catch the yellowness of the clouds. Touch on my paper towel, and I'm just going to drop in so I'm leaving a little bit of a gap. This one's a little bit closer, so it'll have more detail. So I'm sort of painting round where the seats are in the boat. And then I'm going to use a different blue to these blues to make it stand out. So you could use an ultramarine, or you could use a cobalt blue or a phthalo blue or a mixture of blues, whichever you want. So this one's a phthalo blue. It's quite a bright blue. I am just going to knock it back with a little touch of red light, just to mute it down into sort of a more turquoisey colour. Touch it on my paper towel, and because it's got a slightly different base blue than the boat itself, will stand out a little bit more from the sea. Don't want too fine a line on the base because it's in the sand. So I've wet my brush, washed my brush, take a little bit of the water out. I'm just going to blend it in with a touch of water so that the front of the boat is lighter. And a little bit more paint in this back of the boat so that we get a sense of this bit's in the light and this bit's in the shadow. Okay, so damp brush, and I'm just going to lift out a little bit of light. I'm going to just drop in a little tiny bit of yellow into there, and I'm just going to mix it in with a damp brush. So I washed my brush, I'm just going to touch that in. With a drop of blue around, there we go. Okay, so the other boat I think classically is either a red or a yellow, so I'm going to go for a cadmium red. And I might just add a touch of red light in there to make it a bit orangey. So cadmium red light and a touch of cadmium red and a touch of red light. And use whatever size brush you feel comfortable with. Again, I've purposefully not done a flat base because it has to look like it's sitting in the sand. I'm just going to drop a little bit of yellow ochre into this one as well while it's damp, just so it's got a little reflection of the sand into there. Just tap in a little bit more pigment. There we go. Okay, so this should be dry now for me to go back into it. So I'm going to use some burnt sienna and ultramarine blue mix. So burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, which will make a really nice sort of browny bluey dark colour, much nicer than a black. So you can make it more brown or you can make it more blue. It's up to you. But it's a nice dark colour, you just have to play with it for a little while. And mixing your darks is really helpful as well. So I've flattened the end of my little number 4 and I'm just going to paint some oars that are running down the boat, and I'm just going to put that little seat across. Maybe one across there as well. A little bit of detail. So the same for this one, same colour, seats across, trying to keep the angle right. Just take your time. Before I paint the dark on there, I'm going to just go for a little bit of burnt umber. Take it off on my paper towel. I'm just going to put that edge round the boat. Just going to drop in a little bit of a shadow with that one while I'm there. add a little bit of blue into here just to change it up a little bit. Still quite thick into that dark. So that was just some Cerulean Blue. And I'm just going to put a little bit of an edge. Push it. And then push it into the, so this is just a damp brush. Might just add a little bit more of that red over the top just to push it in. Okay. Quite like that one. This one not so much, but you know, it is what it is. I'm just going to add a touch of alizarin crimson into that mix to make it more of a shadow colour. So a dark shadow colour. So I'm imagining that the light's coming this way, because otherwise we've got a problem with the I'm just going to dampen off the paper now so that the shadow becomes less intense. Just water. Okay, so let's put a similar sort of shadow around this boat. Drop in some shadow colour in. Water. A little bit less intense shadow. Okay, so a little bit of cadmium red and yellow ochre together to make the buoy colour, sort of a yellowy orange. And then I'm just going to use that shadow colour just to darken this side and cast a shadow. A bit of that. There we go. Okay, so we're getting there. Might just want to add a little bit more yellow, I think, to this boat here. That's better. Okay, so still working with my darks. So let's just burnt sienna into that bluey mix. Just going to add a little bit of Paynes Grey into there as well. A nice bluey dark. Still with a little number 4 brush, touch it, and I'm just going to do a little head. And then I'm just going to choose a nice bright red. For a coat. And maybe a little bit of this sort of indigo and dark mix together. Touch on the peg towel. I think this person's sort of Nordic walking. So there's the 2 sticks up on a Nordic walk. I'm just going to soften this back leg so that it looks like there's some movement at the bottom. Just drop in a little bit of yellow ochre into that mix, just push it away. I think those sticks need to go a bit further down. Yeah, not sure where they are. So pick up some of that shadow colour, that sort of purpley colour, and a little bit of a shadow into that damp yellow ochre will work. Okay, so we've got, it's really a lot about the skies, this one. Just going to brighten this jacket a little bit. So we've got the sky, we've got the sea, quite liking the sea, I quite like that background. We've got some mid-ground interest here, so I want to now do some foreground to just step it back, because basically otherwise it's a bit boring. So I'm going to be using a little trusty card. I'm going to just lay down using my little mop brush a little bit of under rocks here. That's just yellow ochre, a little bit of water, maybe a few over here, a bit paler. Okay, so that's my light colour that I'm going to be under the rocks. So I'm now going to go for some sepia or a dark brown mix. So this is my sepia straight on top. Keeping it damp's important, so I keep that spritzer bottle handy. I'm going to add in some of this dark mix whatever's on your palette for some darks. Keep it spritzed. Okay, so I'm going to start here because this is drying quickest. So just scratching. Just to build up that sort of stones. Different angles, and all this is a little piece of a plastic card. If your paint's not staying after you scrape it, just wait a little bit longer. And if you are finding that your paint isn't moving when you scrape it, just wait a little bit with spritz it and then just wait. So that's my rocks done. I'm just going to scratch out a little bit of foliage while it's there and damp. Different angles. And you could go back in with some greens and a touch of hooker's green on my card. I don't want too much colour though here because I want the foreground to support the background, not detract from it. So I'm just going to go with a little bit more sepia. And I've moved on to my rigger brush, a little bit of yellow ochre. And maybe a touch of Paynes Grey. There we go. Nice sort of dark browny colour. Touch on my brush, and I'm just going to enhance some of these grassy areas. There we go. As usual, less is more really with things like that, but it works really, really nicely. So, still with my rigger brush in this dark colour, might add a little bit of this lighter brown to it. Touch on my paper towel, and I'm going to just draw in Oh, quite a simple little beach scene today. Hope you have fun with it really, and enjoy playing. I might just put another layer of red over this to just bring it a little bit forward. Just a red glaze, just to warm it up a little bit. That's nicer, especially with her red in the as well next to that red boat. And then I'm just going to add some really thin little lines using that tiny brush that I showed you that I wasn't sure I was going to use, but I am. So again, control it on the paper towel. I don't want too much, but just want to get that sort of idea of the light on the back of these little poles of theirs. Maybe just one or two lighter grasses. There we go. Okay, my last little bit that's always mine is to put some seabirds on, because I always love my seabirds. I'm going to just carry on using this tiny brush today to put some really distant seagulls on. There we go, and that's about it really for me. I'll put one more darker bird in. So I hope you've enjoyed that one. I hope you have fun painting it, and let me know what you think really, as I'm transitioning to the beach, I think, today from my bedroom, from my day bedroom. A lot of rest, so hope it's restful for you and that you have fun and enjoy it, and give it a go. Like, subscribe, share the thing, all the rest of it. If you want to drop me a coffee, that's brilliant. I will put the link in the comments. Have fun. See you soon. Bye bye.